Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. It's nearly match day again. We were just discussing off air how quickly they seem to come around, even though we've no midweek games. But this is the preview episode for West Ham versus Burnley. The Clarets heading down to London for the next instalment of 2025's Capital Punishment. With me, Darren Bentley and Paul Woodhouse. Daz, you'll remember, I think, the original Capital Punishment, weren't you? Were you at the turf when...
Yeah, we did
had
the
that
DVD
run...
on the back of it with our old friend Ed Abbis was part of that DVD. But what a time that was!
Yeah, we wouldn't mind a few results like that, would we? Because we've got Chelsea coming up, we've got Fulham coming up, two teams that we beat on that glorious cup run. I think about that Chelsea game quite a bit. I was sat in front of Alistair Campbell, and it was just one of the most kind of magical nights. And then, of course, we go to Spurs and get stuffed and, things like that. But these games are coming thick and fast, aren't they? I know we've got an international break, which we've just been bemoaning off air, but, West Ham got a win last week against Newcastle. It's still wide open, isn't it, Darren, in terms of the, what the outcome of that game could be?
Well, their fans have suffered more capital punishment than anybody at the minute. West Ham at that bloody stadium, they don't seem to win there last week, excepting, which is the perfect time to win, wasn't it, with us coming up next? I think I alluded last week to the fact that probably gave them a little bit of an extra 10%, knowing that they had us next, and that back-to-back wins could lift them sort of out of safety. But listen, we went to Wolves and did them over. West Ham are in the same category. We know full well what the London Stadium's like. It's an absolute silent library, isn't it, when they're not performing well? The fans will be off half an hour before the end if they're getting beat. So it doesn't take a genius to know what Scott Parker's team talk's going to be on Saturday. And again, be like Wolves. I talked about it before the Wolves game. Get on the front foot, get at them. Because you get the first goal down there, it can set the scene for the afternoon, can't it?
Yeah. And Woody, I mean, we've got experience of going there and getting results. It's not like it's one of those grounds where we're, no win there since 1976. I remember that game a good few years ago where we demolished them and the fans were rioting amongst themselves. They were trying to get in the director's box. Things have settled a little bit since then, but they've never seemed to settle in the London Stadium, have they? I mean, it just doesn't feel like a football arena. I've been a couple of times and you're miles away from the pitch. I don't know what it is. A lot of teams settle into new grounds. Arsenal certainly have and Man City certainly have. But West Ham, you just don't think will ever truly settle in that stadium, do you?
Feels a little bit too big for them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And they've obviously screwed it up just a touch. And it's... There'd probably be a slightly better time to play West Ham, which would be when they're on an absolute when they haven't just won one the week before, but they're still going to be a bit creaky, aren't they? So, like Daz says, go at him a little bit, but it's a Scott Parker way again, isn't it? You can imagine he's going to go there, and it's going to be extremely tight, and it's going to be, let's see how tight we can keep it. If we can nick one at some point, all well and good. I can't imagine we're going to go hell for leather at him.
No, but Daz, I mean, we talked about this briefly, I think, in the debrief. Kind of, you kind of want to see us abandon that back five, don't you? You want to kind of think to yourself, we've talked a lot about, Estev looking much more comfortable in a back four, which I think is almost probably worth the extra man as it is. And you probably want a Chowner on one wing and Anthony on the other to really try and get at the fullbacks and try and get some service into Fleming, who's going to cause them West Ham centre-halves a little bit of a different problem to perhaps what Lyle Foster might do, and we expect Foster to be back amongst the matchday squad. But would your only changes be, perhaps Chowner in for Brun Larson and maybe kind of getting somebody else a bit more creative in instead of Laurent?
Certainly positive. You've got to make a positive change down there and get an extra attacking player on the pitch, because anybody running at their defence gives them kittens, don't they? Because Kilman's got a rick in him every week. The fullbacks got nothing to write home about. There's actually some players in that West Ham side that I think are decent. I mean, Paqueta is a talent. The lad Potts is a real talent. Bowen we all know about. So they've got their own creative edge. But if we've shown we can be relatively solid. And I don't see why we shouldn't go back to a 4, and get that extra player on the. And it wouldn't surprise me, if he goes with Brun Larson again. He doubled down on Brun Larson a week or two ago, didn't he? And it wouldn't surprise me. I think he likes from Lawson's backtracking when he needs to get back in there, which Chowner doesn't really do. So I wouldn't surprise me if he goes again with Brun Lawson, but definitely too wide, men. The 10's the question then, isn't it? Who you go with the 10? But I definitely see us making that change, that positive move.
Yeah, Woody, is there a if not Chowner, is there a case to be made for a Hannibal who perhaps has that work rate coming back that we not criticising Chowner, but I'm sure that's something they're working on with Chowner only being a young lad, that responsibility when we've not got the ball. Would you perhaps then kind of go the halfway house between Chowner and Brun Larson? Perhaps not in terms of getting to a byline, getting across him, but a bit more creativity, a bit perhaps stronger in the tackle and still got that work rate. Would you perhaps look at Hannibal as an option coming in on that left-hand side?
Well, we know that it's worked before, don't we? We know that it's been a good option, but they're not fantastic options, are they? We might get a little bit more out of that position, but not an extraordinary amount more. And it's one of those things, isn't it? The things that have worked, i.e. bringing him on, the players that have been coming on in the last 15 have done a reasonable job. And so the game plan of sorts has worked relatively well, you could argue. But it's that strange halfway house, like you say, that we don't quite have that attacking intent. We don't have a manager who necessarily wants to go with that attacking intent to start off with. So I can see Brun Larson starting again, and it allows, obviously, Walker a little bit more room to roam, as it were, should he have to go down the right-hand flank. But I wouldn't even discount Edwards. He had a nice little 5 or 10 minutes, didn't he? If you want to go something fully creative. But yeah, I think Permin 1 from 3, we know what we're getting out of that, and I'd say go with a back four, because we know we've been a lot more solid with a back four, as much as anything, than with a back three and a back five. So yeah,
I will throw you a little curveball. If it was me, I'd be tempted to leave Florentino out. I've not been overly impressed with him last couple of weeks, and
I was going to come on to Florentino. We didn't.
I'd be tempted to put Josh in there and play him alongside. Josh.
So put Laurent.
Yeah.
So have the two in there for a bit more industry, shall we say? Is that what you're looking at?
You're unlucky, Josh, when he drops in and out the side. He's a 110% every week, isn't he, Josh Laurent?
Yeah.
And I can see him doing a role in there alongside Josh Cullen and freeing up Chowner then. But that's I don't see that.
Is that enough though? Yeah, is that? I mean, there's all them quotes about talent and enthusiasm, or talent and effort and things. And I love Josh Laurent, right? I think in terms of what we paid for him and the impact he had last year, and actually coming in and doing a role in parts, is 110% enough when he's that amount of talent compared to Florentino, who I know we said kind of off air last week you've not been impressed, when Florentino perhaps has that extra bit of bigger game experience, perhaps used to playing against players. Sometimes that kind of first yard is in your head rather than in your legs kind of thing. Do you think it's enough, Daz, to swap them two?
It's a gamble, but I don't see it being a huge gamble. I think Josh Laurent will give you pretty much what Florentino's giving you now, and a little bit more. I've been a bit underwhelmed with him. I might be in the minority here, but I've been a bit underwhelmed with him. I thought he started really well in the last few weeks, and I'll put Jaden Anthony in that category. The one I'm Jaden Anthony's biggest fan.
Yeah.
I think he's fallen off a cliff in the last couple of weeks. But if you're going to mix things up and you've got to try and keep a squad happy and give people game time, and rest people sometimes as well. So it would be in my mind. I'm not sure it'll be in Scott's, but it would be in my mind.
Is it in your mind, Woody? I know we kind of, we were quite excited by Florentino, and he did start well. I do tend to agree with Daz. I think the last couple of games he's not had the same impact. He's given the ball away a little bit, and let's not be too harsh. We collectively given the ball away a bit too much against Leeds, against Wolves, and certainly against Arsenal. Are you ready to kind of rest Florentino? I mean, he obviously had the summer World Club Cup adventure with Benfica before signing for, is there a case to be made there that we know footballers shouldn't get tired, but actually it's a resting rather than a drop-in, and you'd rather rest him for West Ham, where you've got somebody who you think can compete with their midfield?
No, I wouldn't be switching up that. I wouldn't be switching up that midfield.
We love a disagreement.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think Florentino's maybe suffering a little bit from that. You don't necessarily see what he's doing, type thing. He's there as a shield, isn't he? He's there to act as a shield, to get his foot in and play it simple, which doesn't always catch the eye, does it? His first couple of games he was playing a little bit further up.
Josh Cullen does that, and it does catch the eye.
It's one of those, I think, with Josh Cullen, where he does have a little bit more freedom, doesn't he? He's the one who's kind of looking for the ball. He's looking to be an outlet constantly, whether it be further up the field or further back or whatever. He wants to be that fulcrum, doesn't he? Whereas, Florentino is a little bit, to me, looks to be just there to break more things up and do something extremely simply rather than trying to join play up. And it seems to be that we've got Uchukwu doing those little shuttle runs at the top, aren't we? I think, I don't know, I don't tend to have the same view, but then again, I'm only watching on the TV. And so it's one of those things, I can either see something obviously vastly different in terms of I can sit there and try and watch him for a while, or you don't see him at all. And it's one of those, isn't it? And you guys are obviously seeing him in the flesh. So,
do you think then, Woody, that perhaps we noticed Josh Cullen because of the work Florentino's doing, because Josh Cullen then goes, actually, I can drive forward. Yeah, it's almost rugby-esque at times, isn't it? Driving forward 5-10 yards and then sideways past to try and move us up a field. I mean, I've noticed this a few times this season, and this isn't, the Florentino point, but I've noticed that sometimes it almost looks like we're playing rugby, and I'm not a big rugby fan, so I don't really know the rules of rugby. Turnovers and all that. Like, turnover has apples in my eyes. It's not, but it's about that kind of. I think sometimes what Cullen does is he's picking the ball up and he's driving us forward a little bit, allowing everybody else to come up with us, and then we go to, and that's when we're at his most effective. It feels like a weird analogy to me, but it feels almost rugby-esque. Do you think the fact that he's got, and I don't know any rugby positions, so I don't want to call Florentino a hooker just in case there's a cultural issue in Portugal, but does he kind of go, right, actually, Josh, you can get forward and do what you need to do to drive us 10 yards before we have a breakdown or whatever we're going to call it. There's going to be sports fans watching this on YouTube wondering what the fuck I'm on about. And does he get to do that mainly because Florentino is behind him and will break up play, will shield the ball if it comes back at him, etc., do you think?
Sorry, was that to me?
Yeah.
No, Woody, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
We're both equally as
I bamboozled
flummoxed.
you with my rugby talk, didn't you? I'm
so,
kind of auditioning for the BBC gig for Rugby League.
No, you are right about the hooker thing, though. I think he's a little bit more of a
good
hooker in size and distribution, so it's fair enough. No, I think the way that we have the midfield set it up at the minute, it's like you can see what roles each individual has. And they're all playing it. And so I think there is a little bit of merit in terms of what you're saying, that instead of Josh Cullen expected to be doing all of those three roles at once and him only being in a two, which is extremely difficult to do, irrespective of who you are, never mind playing at Burnley when we're getting overrun quite considerably every week. And so, yeah, I think it does allow him more freedom to do what it is that he's doing. And we've seen this season that, that goal he scored against Sunderland, some of the balls that he's been playing through, him joining up. He's a lot more of a creative force in the final third than maybe he has been in other campaigns. So I think it work. I think it does work quite well in terms of what you're saying. Greavesy.
Yeah. Let's stick with the midfield, Daz, because I think we're kind of exploring something here. So we'll come on to Leslie Uchukwu in a second, because I'm quite interested in the role he plays. Just looking at the last Premier League season, because I think that's the biggest comparison we've got. do you feel comfortable with both? I mean, I think this is an obvious answer, but do you feel more comfortable with both system and personnel under Scott Parker Daz in this Premier League season compared to us going into games just knowing that actually that midfield might as well not be there because they weren't providing much in the way of protection? Company kept Jack Cork out, which I thought was a massive mistake. We didn't really ever get somebody to sit alongside Cullen to really allow him to do what he does. Do you think this setup, both in terms of personnel and system, does it give you more comfort than we had under Vincent Kompany when we were perhaps almost abandoning central midfielder because we were trying to squeeze in as many of his new flashy toys as he could?
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with the midfield unit as it stands. I think there's interchangeability in there between players. If Josh Cullen misses out one week, then you've got Florentino who can do a similar sort of job. Josh Cullen, Josh Laurent are both complement each other really well. At the top end, you can play Hannibal, you can play with Uchukwu. I think it works really well. I don't see any issues with it. I don't see us ever going three deep midfielders. I don't think the two holding midfield in front of a four works well for us. We need to get that creative spark, don't we? We talk about not scoring enough goals in this side, and we've had this discussion so many times, but we're doing okay goals wise. We're actually doing okay. We're maybe not creating as many chances as other times, but we're actually taking a good percentage of them. So something's working right, and I think Parker's got things ticking along quite nicely. He's got a really tight unit. You can see that from the Keeping the Faith videos that come out from the club on a regular basis. It seems a really tight-knit unit. This is why I mentioned about Florentino. I think you need to give some of those players a bit of game time, a bit of belief that they're part of the squad, that we haven't got an 11 or a 12 with a few backups. But they all seem a really well-motivated group. They all seem really on song and playing as one. We see that before the game, see after the game with the fans. Yeah. But I'm happy with that midfield unit. I don't think that needs looking at all in January. I think if we need anything in January, it might be a cover at the back, and we all know we need a striker of some description. But the midfield works really well for me, and I'm really happy with it, whoever plays.
Yeah, and Woody, just on Uchukwu, I think he's probably of that midfield been the one that's impressed me the most. It could be the fact that he's weighed in with a couple of goals. It could be them shuttle runs that you mentioned. He is somebody who likes to drive. Has he surprised you with how forward and his direction of play is? Because I think I thought he was a bit like Florentino. We were going to have two kind of enforcers that would allow Cullen to be the metronome and play passes. But Uchukwu is the one that sometimes just thinks, you know what, we need to grab this by the scruff of the neck and drive forward. Have you surprised at how advanced he is in games at times?
I was with you, and I think a lot of people thought that's what he came as, a lot more of a defensive midfielder who could bring the ball out. But not only does he do that, but that link up job that we're expecting Hannibal to do, he does a far better job at it. Yeah, he seems to be a little bit cooked after 60 minutes. But I think he's done. I think he's been a little minor revelation. I think this midfield three has been a little bit of a revelation. But I think especially Uchukwu, because the stuff that he does do, you do notice, and he does do it relatively well, considering. So I mean, like as Daz, I'd probably keep it very, very similar, and I wouldn't start messing around too much. And it is what's out wide. It really is our attacking threat as much as anything. It's getting, and it's the point is being able to spend enough money to be able to get somebody who will be an influence in the Premier League. That's the thing. We know that forward positions are really difficult, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's that old saying, isn't there, about necessity being the mother of invention, and it may well be that we know full well we've been searching for a bit of a 10, and they've probably tried a few things out on the training ground. Uchukwu's probably stood out in that role, and it's, let's throw him in and see how we go on. And he has flourished. I mean, we all thought Fleming would play a 10. But we play Fleming as a 10. We're not really going to get much from Foster and Fleming together, I don't think. And there's our backups gone, because I don't think Breuer still is hitting his straps.
No, looked a bit better when he came on against Arsenal. Just moving out to the wings, as we kind of touched on very briefly at the beginning, but and Woody mentioned Marcus Edwards and that free kick against the post. Has he done enough to perhaps start to force Scott Parker's arm? I mean, we've been a bit disappointed with Anthony. Is there something to be said for actually West Ham? Nuno's probably watched all of our last few games, the Wolves game, the Leeds game, the Arsenal game, and all he's really seen of Marcus Edwards is a little cameo when he's at the pub. Is there something to be said for kind of, throwing in a Chowner and Edwards against West Ham, because it's very difficult to set up and work on the training ground against a player who you've just got Championship videos of rather than Premier League videos? And do you think Scott Parker's, he's not that snide? He'll want to work his system.
It's impossible for us to say really what's going on there, isn't it? We've seen so little of Marcus Edwards that it can only really be that he's not delivering on the training ground, you would imagine, because there's been enough opportunities now with 10 games and a couple of cup games to give him a go in the side. And I know he didn't really take his chance against Cardiff in that cup game, but that was one of the nights when nobody really took the chance, did they? So I don't probably think he's done enough, but we don't know, do we? He has got little magic in his boots. We know that. And those 3 sizes too big shorts. He's got magic in there, hasn't he? But I don't know. We're just not going to see enough of it, I don't think. I'd be very surprised if Marcus Edwards starts, because I don't think his work rate is probably what you need from a side. Maybe against a West Ham where you're going to get a bit more of the ball, maybe. But against the better sides, I think you need 11 players who are going to run you 10 miles a game. And he isn't one of those, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Woody, I mean, it looked like it was probably in the summer a kind of Luca Coglioscio or Edwards. Luca went to Espanyol. I don't think he's played that much at Espanyol, but we have obviously had that very famous YouTube short where we kind of highlighted that QPR, and Coglioscio is one of them that is bombing back en masse when there's 30 Burnley players surrounding a QPR player despite being 2 up. I guess it's down to players to prove in training that actually they're good enough. And we think that's probably the case for Trezor, 22 minutes, 10 seconds in for the first Trezor mentioned on this podcast, for anyone counting. But it's kind of, is it possible to prove in training how you're going to replicate in match? So, you know what I mean? I mean, Daz mentioned it. I mean, the Cardiff game was a bit of a write-off for everybody. It almost feels like it's an egg and chicken. Does he need a game where Scott Parker says to him, pulls him to one side, says, look, I'm taking a big chance on you here. I'm trusting you not to mess this chance up. And maybe it's a West Ham at home or a Wolves at home when he gets that chance, 2/3 into the season. Is it difficult to prove on the training ground what you're going to do on a Saturday? Is basically what I'm asking.
Well, you can only really be adjudicated on game time and how you look in training. And Scott Parker actually mentioned Edwards today, talking about how well he has been training, especially over this past week. So it's obviously in contention, and he's speaking of him in relatively pleasant tones. But it's one of those, isn't it? Some players need that little bit of extra game time in the boots. You need to get up to pace with the Premier League as well. So it's an additional ask, isn't it, being in this division? So I genuinely don't know. But it's that thing from a fan perspective. We know that we have a manager who is extremely risk averse, and you see these 2 wing positions that are very much more defensive minded or have a very much a defensive component to them, and you just want to be able to see people doing wingerish type things, don't you, every now and again? And you did see that with Edwards, he did start putting people onto the back foot, which is something we don't necessarily do enough of, or it doesn't feel that we do enough of. But I also get why Parker does what he does. So it's one of those, and like you've said, there isn't that work rate with Edwards. There's literally nothing, and that's not going to change, is it?
Yeah. And is that the pragmatism, Daz, in Scott Parker compared to Company, whose kind of plan was really, let somebody have a couple of games, realise it weren't working, send them to the Trafford Centre for 6 match days, and then bring them back into a starting line? There was no happy medium with Vincent, was there? It was very much kind of, you're in the squad, you start, and then all of a sudden you're not in the match day squad for 5 or 6 weeks. Whereas Scott Parker tends to, I guess, stick with what he knows. And there's like a little bit of an introduction here. There's a little bit of an introduction there. Chauner's probably played a little bit more from the start than I perhaps expected. It feels like it's the pragmatic way of running a football team, probably the correct way of running a football team.
Yeah, I mean, it felt a little bit under company at times. It felt a bit like blind faith sometimes, that you just send them out and go on, lads, you're better than these. And they're going, actually, we're not. Whereas with Parker, I think he builds them up a little bit more.
Have you watched this? Yeah.
As their peers, almost. And you can just tell that. Yeah. I mean, far be it for us to slag company off. He's at Bayern Munich, who are breaking records left, right, and centre at the minute. But he's playing with an elite bunch of players now. And he didn't have an elite bunch of players at Burnley. And that's maybe the difference. Sometimes elite managers need elite players. Parker's the right fit at the right time. And pragmatism is what you need in this league. If we can pick up the odd point here and there, the odd win here and there, and the odd point here and there, that could be enough to keep you up, rather than just going out there and blindly saying we're going to score one more than you, and coming back in with your arses kicked. So he's the right man at the right time, and he's playing all the right tunes for me at the minute. He's picking the right sides. He's getting everything out of his squad that he can. As I said before, they seem a motivated squad. I don't think he needs, or he shouldn't need, to motivate those players. Motivation should come from here. If you're a player, it shouldn't come from a manager telling you that you're good. It should come from your own heart. And they seem a really well motivated squad. The trick is keeping that up when the results aren't there. Yeah. But so far, we've kept ticking along and picking results up, and you get the belief back. And another win on Saturday at West Ham will, belief will flood back into the veins. You've got an international break then. You can rest for 2 weeks and bask in that. I think everybody's reasonably happy at the minute. We know we're trailing, compared to the Leeds and Sunderland who were promoted with us, but I still think they'll come back to the pack. Leeds are within striking distance. Sunderland, they'll get beat at the weekend, and that's 1 point from 6. They'll come back a little bit. So all is rosy in my garden at the minute. And you know how I'm negative. I am about to stay up, but all is rosy in my garden at the minute. We're giving ourselves a chance.
Bloody hell. Yeah.
Must be marriage. Must be a good thing. Must
Is
be
that
doing me
point
well.
per game that we look at into. This is it, mate. I was going to say, just kind of, wait till after the international break when that's worn off, perhaps, for the true Daz Bentley. The people on Up the Clarets won't know what to think of this with you being so bloody positive. We're going to have to get Chris Borden on just to drag us down at some point over the weekend, preferably not after we get beat at West Ham, but there we go. Let's leave it there, chaps. I think we'll come back and do the rapid. I think I'm on the mic for that one again because Simon is in Germany, enjoying some German hospitality. And then we'll be back for the debrief proper again on Sunday, which again I think I'm on the mic. And then we've got a couple of specials for the international break, which we'll perhaps talk about a couple of really interesting bits for Burnley fans and speaking to a couple of people. That should keep us entertained over that dull international break, which I just can't believe we're having another one 2.5 weeks after the last one. But there we go. But wherever you're watching Burnley at West Ham, I'm going to use the American way of announcing fixtures. Burnley at West Ham United, wherever you're watching it. Enjoy the game, whether you're there or you're at home or you're stateside. And until we see you again, up the Clarets.